At 59, Margaret Turner had grown used to a quiet rhythm in her life. Her mornings began with the sound of birds brushing against the maple tree outside her suburban Chicago home, followed by a slow walk to her mailbox and a cup of warm tea on the porch. For decades, she had lived in that house with her late husband, Robert, raising two children who were now grown and busy with lives of their own. Her daughter, Emily, had moved to New York to work as a nurse, while her son, Daniel, lived across town with his wife and kids. Margaret loved her family, but more often than not, her days stretched out in long silence. It was during one of those ordinary afternoons that something unexpected happened. Margaret had ordered a few groceries online: milk, bread, fruit, and a small cake for herself. She expected the delivery to be quick and uneventful. But when the doorbell rang and she opened it, she was startled to find a boy who looked no older than 19 standing there with two large paper bags balanced carefully in his arms. His hair was a little messy, his sneakers worn, and his uniform shirt slightly oversized. But his eyes were bright and kind. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the young man said with a polite smile. "I'm Jason. I've got your delivery here." Margaret blinked, surprised not by his presence, but by the sheer energy he carried. Something about his voice reminded her of her own son when he was a teenager, full of eagerness and determination. She quickly stepped aside, gesturing for him to set the bags on the counter just inside the door. "Thank you, Jason," she said softly. "I didn't realize they sent such young people out for these jobs." Jason laughed lightly, not in offense but in good humor. "Oh, I've been doing this for a while. I'm working to save money for college. Every shift counts, you know?" Margaret found herself smiling, though she hadn't planned to. She admired his honesty, his willingness to work hard rather than wait for opportunities to come to him. "That's admirable," she replied. "Not many young people your age would have such dedication." Jason shrugged with a grin. "Well, my mom raised me that way. She always says nothing good comes easy." The words struck something deep in Margaret's heart. She had said similar things to Emily and Daniel when they were young. Watching Jason reminded her of those days, the ones filled with scraped knees, bedtime stories, and hurried breakfasts before school. Suddenly, the quiet of her home felt less like peace and more like emptiness. Before Jason left, he thanked her again, and Margaret, almost without thinking, said, "Would you like a glass of water before you go?" Jason hesitated for only a moment, then accepted. She poured him a glass, and he stood at the doorway sipping it politely. That small act of hospitality felt almost foreign to her, as though she had forgotten what it was like to care for someone in her home. When Jason handed the glass back and left, she stood in the entryway longer than she needed to, staring at the space where he had stood. Something had shifted inside her, though she couldn't explain what. Over the next few weeks, Margaret began ordering groceries more often, not because she needed them, but because she hoped Jason might be the one to deliver. Sometimes it was another worker, but more often than not, it was him, arriving with his cheerful smile and light-hearted chatter. Each time, they spoke a little longer. He told her about his classes at community college, his dream of transferring to a university, and his part-time job not only delivering groceries, but also helping out at a local hardware store. She told him about her late husband, her children, and how she had once been a school librarian who loved recommending books to eager readers. One rainy afternoon, when Jason arrived drenched from the storm, Margaret hurried to hand him a towel. He laughed at her fussing, but gratefully dried his hair. "You remind me of my grandma," he said without thinking, and Margaret chuckled, though the words warmed her heart instead of wounding her pride. She missed being that figure of comfort, someone others could rely on. It was during that visit that Jason noticed the piano in her living room. "Do you play?" he asked curiously. "I used to," Margaret admitted. "I haven't touched it in years." "You should," Jason encouraged. "My mom always says music keeps the heart young." His casual comment lingered in her mind long after he left. That evening, she wiped the dust off the piano keys and, with trembling fingers, pressed a chord. The sound was rusty, hesitant, but it filled the room with life in a way silence never could. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of joy returning. Their connection grew. Jason would sometimes linger longer than his job required, not because he was shirking duties, but because he enjoyed their conversations. He'd tell her about the struggles of balancing school, work, and friendships. She, in turn, shared life lessons she had learned through decades of trials and joys. Margaret found herself looking forward to his visits as much as he seemed to look forward to hers. One day, Margaret asked him, "Do you have time for lunch? I made extra soup." Jason hesitated, but when he saw the hopeful look in her eyes, he agreed. They sat at her small dining table, bowls steaming in front of them, and talked like old friends. Jason told her that his father had left when he was very young, and it had always been just him and his mom. Margaret listened with compassion, her heart aching for him. In that moment, she realized why she felt so drawn to him. He was a young man searching for guidance, and she was a woman longing to give the love and wisdom she still carried. As weeks turned into months, their bond became something deeper, not romantic, but profoundly human. Jason began calling her Miss Margaret affectionately, and sometimes when his shift ended early, he'd stop by to check on her. He helped her fix a broken garden gate, carried heavy bags of soil for her flowers, and even set up her new phone when she admitted she struggled with technology. In return, Margaret became a steady presence in his life, someone who encouraged him when he felt overwhelmed, someone who believed in his potential. The day came when Jason received his acceptance letter to the university he had dreamed of attending. He ran to Margaret's house, holding the letter high, his excitement bubbling over. Margaret cried tears of joy as she hugged him tightly, feeling as proud as if he were her own grandson. "You see, Jason," she whispered, "hard work really does pay off. You're going to do great things." Before he left for college, Jason came by one last time with a small gift. It was a framed photo of the two of them, taken by his friend when they were planting flowers in her yard. On the bottom, he had written, "Thank you for believing in me." Margaret held it close, her heart swelling with gratitude. She realized then that her life had changed, not because she had sought out excitement, but because a young delivery boy had walked into her world and reminded her of the beauty of connection. In the quiet months that followed, Margaret still missed her late husband and longed for her children's visits, but she no longer felt invisible or forgotten. Jason called her often from school, updating her on his classes and his new adventures. She continued playing her piano, tending her garden, and even volunteering part-time at the local library again. Life wasn't silent anymore. It was full of echoes, laughter,